First of all, I just feel like saying that if you're here today, it's not by mistake. I just want you to know that. I truly believe that God works in everybody's life, and even if you don't know why it's happening, just trust that it's happening for a reason. So Jami and I first met in high school. She was a freshman and I was a junior, and I suppose it was kind of one of those things where my friends, the group of upperclassmen, were very curious about all the incoming freshman girls, and decided that we needed to see what they were all about. But in that, it wasn't us that were together, but we each had friends that kind of dated each other. And so we kind of started hanging out amongst friends, and then we found out that she just lived about a half mile down the road from me. And so with that, we just kind of built a friendship because it was easy for me to pick her up and go to school or take her home after school, which still was strictly just friends. And then through that, we both started dating other people more seriously, and so we just remained friends, almost like best friends, that kind of brother-sister type thing, and just kept kind of going about our lives. I went on to college, and obviously the years difference, she was still in high school, and through that stage, we kind of both, at some point, became single, and we had some friends. My best friend, literally is my best friend, and her best friend were dating, and during this time, and so it was one Christmas break. We went to hang out with them, and again, I don't know, maybe there was a little curiosity here by this point, but Jake and Courtney, our friends, decided that we were going to kind of go out on a double date, and throughout the night we just hung out, had a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, and again, she only lived down the road from me, right? So I had to take her home, and walked her up on the front porch and hurriedly gave her a kiss, and then proceeded to leave for the weekend on a snowmobile trip. So.
Okay. Well, he actually has the date written down of the kiss, which kind of makes me giggle, because I tell him all the time, he remembers things like that, but he can't remember what we did yesterday or what we had for dinner. But that's important. Okay, so it was in high school that I found my faith because I started dating Steve, who attended a church that actually talked about faith. And it was so different from what I grew up with. There was no service agenda paper handed out with scripted things to say back to the pastor, and the songs actually made me weep instead of lulling me to sleep. I grew up in the Lutheran Church, which is the sister or brother, I suppose, to the Catholic Church. So those of you that grew up in that faith, religion, just know what I mean. Like, he says this, you say this, he says, this, you do that, you kneel, you stand, it's a ritual. And to me, that was not faith. The sermons were filled with fun stories at this new church, and I stayed awake through all of them. And I attended the church because it made me feel good, and I was getting something out of it. And at this point of my life, I knew who God was, but didn't have a relationship with him.
So on with our dating story, that kiss kind of set it off, and she actually stayed with me. She even followed me to IU, and we continued together all through my college. And then I graduated from college, and I went on to get a job in Indianapolis that also took me to Louisville. And I was kind of set on that path. Like, I thought, okay, here I am. I graduated college. I'm going to be in the business world in big city, and everything was good. And then two significant things happened during that time. One was Jami was still in college, and I was out, and our worlds were kind of different. And we found ourselves deciding that it was time to part our ways. For me, that was terribly difficult because I was kind of off on my own in my job when I was in Louisville. I was working on contract with a company down there, and so I spent a lot of time by myself. I was down there for the week and then back in Indianapolis on the weekend, but I found a lot of my faith during that time. I grew up in the church. I always was a believer, but I found that strength that I needed. One, through a couple mentors of mine, my aunt and uncle, Barb and Phil. I spent a lot of time talking to them. And one thing that Phil taught me was you have to have that personal relationship with Jesus. He was the one, when you met him, or any time, me, multiple times, every time I'd come up, first thing he'd say to me, "How you doing with my Jesus?" And at first I was kind of taken back, like, what do you mean your Jesus? Like, why isn't he my Jesus? Is it our Jesus? But to understand that he was talking about that relationship, that personal friend. And so through all this, it was kind of Phil's telling me, you need to talk to Jesus like he's your friend, like he's right next to you. He's in the room sitting next to you. You don't have to make it some kind of formal prayer or anything. You can just sit and have a conversation. And it was during those times that I could really feel that. It was like I felt like I was just sitting and talking with my best friend. And he helped me through so much. And just as I was about to get my feet back on the ground from a breakup, our company that I worked for lost the contract in Louisville, and that was what they were using to pay my salary, and so then I was let go. So from that, though, I remember sitting in that room when they told me that I was being let go, and the first thought that went through my head was, what's next, Lord? And I guess for I was like 22 at that time, I thought, okay, I got to figure some stuff out, but Lord, you know where I'm going and how to do that. So it was at that point then I moved back to small town USA, and my big city dreams were over, but I knew that God had a better plan.
Okay, so eventually I married Steve, and we attended the church that I spoke of before, and we raised our babies there. The problem with that part of my life was I was consuming church and those around me to get what I wanted. I looked at everything I did as a way to fill my cup. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was living a very selfish life. My world was consumed with accomplishments. I was always looking for the next amazing thing I could do, all while raising 5 babies, being a stay-at-home mom, teaching 5 to 7 exercise classes a week, running marathons, multiple a year, training for and completing Ironman distance triathlons, and then being a wife. I would accomplish something and have a tiny moment of satisfaction, and I was never fulfilled, ever. No matter what I did or who told me they couldn't believe all I could do and do all I could accomplish, none of it was enough. During my marathon training years, my father-in-law asked me one day what I was running from. And I laughed, and I said, "What? I'm not running from anything. I'm running towards the finish line, the goal, to be accomplished." You see, I had no idea that I was living a life of consumption, finding the next thing to cross off my list to finally arrive at satisfaction. And I always fell short of satisfaction, no matter the enormity of the accomplishment. Because I was so consumed with me as the center of my world and the benefit of myself, I lost sight of how important the relationship God gives us on this earth, my marriage. Yes, we had a good marriage. From the outside looking in, we were the couple that other couples wanted to be. High school and college sweethearts who got married and had babies. I found my worth in my children, my fitness accomplishments, my interior design ability, what others said about me, and gave no mind of what my marriage really looked like from a biblical point of view.
And so while Jami was trying to find all her worth in all those things, I was finding my worth in being the provider, the man of the family. Worked hard, worked multiple jobs, did everything I could and felt like that was my mission because she was raising the kids. So my job was to be out there in the workforce, working, bringing home money, making sure that everything was taken care of. I felt very good about myself. I was providing for my family. With the fire department, I was providing for the community. all the little kids knew me. I was Firefighter Steve. What a great guy. But we never really found a lot of time for each other. We would even have times where I would come home at lunch and watch the kids so she could go out on a run. Seems like a pretty great guy, but the point to that is we still weren't finding time together. So in the end, I just kind of looked at it as, I know we don't have time together. I know we're not doing the things we should be, but you're doing your part, I'm doing my part. And there really isn't too much to worry about, especially divorce.
So there came a point where I was broken and lost, and I looked at my marriage as something that was not bringing me joy, and I was very unhappy and told my husband I was done and I wanted a divorce. I am someone that likes to take the hard road, the long path full of hurdles, because when I come out on the other side, I can say to all and to myself, look what I did. Me wanting my marriage over was exactly that. It wasn't serving me. I was getting nothing out of it, and I wanted out. I was better off without my husband, and I would show him and others that I could do it on my own.
So that night, we were in bed. It was exactly 1 week before our 11th wedding anniversary, and Jami told me that she wasn't happy and that she was done. Believe it or not, in our entire relationship, which started in high school and college, all the way through nearly 11 years of marriage, that night was the first night that we prayed together as a couple. It was just, I don't know what it was. I think a lot of it was me not being vulnerable or feeling too vulnerable to pray with my spouse, because I'm a strong man. I don't need to do that, right? But then the real truth is that you find out what kind of man or how strong you really are when you can be vulnerable and you can pray together. That being said, my thought at that time was, well, let's just pray about it. We'll get through this and everything will be fine. Well, it wasn't, because we went on to get the divorce. But through all the separation and the divorce, I remember always having a peace about me. It was for the first time where I really understood what the Bible meant by a peace that passes all understanding. Like, I grew up hearing that phrase since I was a little kid, like, peace passes all understanding. But you don't understand what that really means when people look at you and they say, how can you be so calm about this? How are you not fighting mad? How are you not so angry? They don't understand the peace that you have, and that is that peace that no one else can understand unless you're going through it or you have it. The other thing that really got me through is Psalm 139. During that time, there are so many keys in that psalm about your life that help you through things. And I got to the point, I got up every single morning and I read that and I had it memorized, and I could walk around the house every morning and just say that. But with that peace, the one thing about it is that I would always refer to when people would ask how I'm doing so well or how can you do this, I would say, because God knew this was going to happen before I was even born. Like, he knew this day, he knew this time frame in my life, this season of my life was going to happen before I was even born, before I was even thought of to anyone else. And just to know and have that comfort that he is not leaving me during this time. He knows what I'm going to go through, and he knows, and he's prepared me through it to, I didn't even understand, like, some things that happened before that, but it was God preparing my mind and my heart to get through this next difficult time.
So Steve and I were separated and divorced for a total of 6 years. And in those 6 years, I actually never lost my faith. In fact, I listened to so many different sermons, and I prayed, and I attended church, but I let Jesus watch me control my life and my direction from the back seat. Again, I was in control, and I could work my way out of this decision I made. And Jesus, you just sit back there and look cute in my rearview mirror. You're with me, Jesus, but I'm driving this bus. I got remarried in those 6 years, and as you can imagine, with the same selfish attitude I've always had, that marriage lasted 6 months. Luckily for me, my ex-husband, Steve, was a friend I didn't know I needed. He allowed me to come to him for the first time in our dating and marriage relationship, and I was real and honest with him. I allowed him to see me weak. I allowed myself to come off my platform of being strong and courageous and independent, and to let him see how broken and lonely I was. And it was in that friendship that we rediscovered our true love for one another. He was so patient with me and so caring, something I did not deserve from him at all. But he truly showed me what the love of Jesus looked like in a marriage. It was the first time I had felt the love of Christ through the man that God chose for me. It was beautiful and real, and that began our road to reconciliation. The second time around, we looked at our relationship honestly, and instead of consuming it for our own benefit and agenda, we put Christ in the center of it and worked hard on what living vertically first really meant and what God says about marriage in the Bible. Once we worked on our relationship vertically with Him, we could then honestly work on our marriage horizontally. I learned that my marriage is a reflection of the relationship that God has with me, the church. That God is my number one, and Steve is my number two. Not my children, not my accomplishments, not my gifts, and not my abilities. Focusing on the love that God gives me so undeservingly allows me to love my husband in ways I've never thought possible. Opening my Bible and allowing the gospel to help me find rest in my busyness has opened the doors to so much joy and happiness. I am now a consumer of the Bible and not life. Reading and learning about my Savior as a Jewish rabbi has allowed me to show my husband and kids the love they deserve from me. I am still a woman that likes to set goals and accomplish those goals, but the difference between consuming life and consuming the Bible is that Jesus is in my driver's seat now. He turns my wheel and slows down and lets me see the trees in the forest. He knows where I am now and knows where I'm headed next. Psalm 119:105 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Do you hear it? He is lighting my feet to show me where I am now, but when I look up from where I am, He is also lighting the path of where I need to go. Trust Jesus. Allow His words to penetrate your heart and let the Holy Spirit guide you, and you will find true joy.
I just wanted to add that during our time apart, obviously I did a lot of praying, and one of the prayers that I always said, or I don't know if it was a plea with God or not, but I always said, if it is in your plan for us to get back together, I want to be able to use our story to help others. During our time apart, I didn't share that with Jami, but when we did get back together and we got remarried, I told her that was one of my prayers, and she wasn't ready for that by any means. And she stated that, no, and so I left it there. I never mentioned it again. I prayed about it here and there, but never really did mention it. And one day she just came up to me and said, I think it's time for us to share our story. And that was just an answer from God, and I knew He was working on her heart and her mind to be prepared to do that. So part of that was when shortly after we started coming to PCC, we had a chance to sit down and be interviewed about our story and more in depth of our marriage. And we have a video of that we're not going to show right now. It's about just under 20 minutes long, but I believe we're going to have a link on the website for that, or our YouTube channel. So if you want to kind of get deeper into what Jami and I went through specifically with our marriage, you can take a chance and watch that if you have some time. But that is just our outreach to really kind of share our story, and what ultimately that none of this was about us. It was all about God bringing us back together.